Hi everyone, my name is Cecil Murphey. Everybody calls me Cease. I'm here to talk to you about my background. I'm a survivor of sexual and physical abuse. So I'm going to just tell my story, and then I'd like to throw it open for some questions and responses from you. I'm the fifth of 7 children. My father was what I call a functional alcoholic. He never missed a day of work, but he rarely missed a weekend when he wasn't drunk. And if you don't think much about abuse and physical abuse in families, you know, 1 or 2 children usually get it. Well, guess who? I and one of my sisters, I have a sister who's slightly retarded, and the 2 of us got it the most. So that was one side of it. The reason I mention him is because my father was an alcoholic. My 3 brothers died of the disease. My grandfather was an alcoholic, so I don't know, something was wrong with me. My 3 sisters were not alcoholics. They married alcoholics, so it's all stayed kind of in the family, I guess. And we had no Christian background. I didn't become a Christian until I was 21, 22 years old. But I mentioned that because my father used to beat me regularly. And one of the effects was that he would beat me till I would cry. And I got so determined, I said to myself, he will never see me cry again. I'm 11 years old. I was 11 years old when I made that determination. And so he'd beat me and beat me. And after a while, you know, some of you may know what I'm talking about. You just don't feel it. And the reason I tell this is because I never cried for the next 40 years. I was 51 years old before I really cried again. Now, that's one side. The other side is sexual abuse. Female relatives started sexually abusing me when I was quite young. I don't know when it started. All I know is by 2 or 3, she was abusing me, fondling, all that, and it didn't stop, really, until I was 15 years old. Whenever she'd come around me, she'd hug me, and she'd throw her whole body into mine, something a teenager shouldn't have to put up with. And then she'd tell me explicitly sexual jokes and laugh at them as though she didn't understand them. And you know what? I don't remember much about my childhood. I didn't for many years, but I remembered those jokes. Then when I was maybe somewhere between 5 and 7, my dad had been sick for quite a while, out of work and so on, and we rented a room to a man on Social Security, apparently, and obviously he was a pedophile, and he sexually abused my sister, the one who also got beaten, the slightly retarded one, and me. My sister told, and I didn't, and I have no idea why I didn't tell. I don't know. I can't even give you an answer for that, but my sister told. My dad was so angry, he threw the man and his belongings out on the sidewalk. And that was the end of that, but the abuse had taken place. Now, we deal with sexual abuse in all kinds of ways, physical abuse, you know, abuse is abuse. In my case, it was amnesia, which is a form of denial. Until I was 51 years old, I didn't remember them. I would have strange kinds of feelings. Once in a while, I would remember that when I was 11 years old, I thought about killing myself. I even had a knife, was going to do it, but I didn't have the courage to stab myself. And then I wondered, what was wrong with me? Why would I even want to think that way? Because I thought I had a conventional, happy childhood. When I was 51 years old, I'm a runner and been running for years. And one day, I usually ran 6 miles a day. And one day, I decided to run 12. And on the way home, about the 11th, 12th mile, I just started convulsively crying. I could hardly make it home. And the memories started pouring out. And so that was the beginning. 2 wonderful things happened. My wife and my best friend. I called my best friend. He came over. He just held me and hugged me and let me cry. And I don't know how long I cried, but quite a while. And finally he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You want to talk?" And I said, "I can't." He said, "Okay. Do you want me to leave?" And I said, "Yeah." And so he left. But I knew I could call him at any time. And when my wife worked, when she got home, I told her, and she gave me the perfect answer. She said, "I don't understand this." And I knew she couldn't. My wife was what I call a cradle Christian. She doesn't know what it's like not to be a believer. She said, "I don't understand this, but I love you, and I'm here to do anything I can for you." And that's all I wanted. I knew she couldn't understand it, but she was there for me, and she's always been there for me. So that's essentially my story of of abuse. And then when the memory started coming back, somebody asked me if I'd ever been to a therapist, and the answer is, well, no, because, see, part of my feeling was I couldn't trust anybody. I had to pay. And I don't think that's true with everyone, but this is true with me. And I've been trying the last 20 years to deal with this issue, and as I learn more about my own abuse and the effects of it, is to reach out and help other people. So that's kind of my story. So now, do you have any questions you'd like to ask me? Yes?
What are one or two things you've learned from your experience?
I've learned an awful lot about from the experience. Here's I can sum it in one sentence. I serve a God of presence and not a God of protection. You know, God never promises to make life easy for us. And there are a lot of lessons I've learned, but this is the one that's been the most helpful for me, is that God never promises no troubles will come, but God does promise to be with us. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, what? Yeah, thou art with me. So you ask what I've learned, that's one of the things that I've learned. One of the other things that I've learned is that I'm a worthwhile person. See, one of the things that happens with those of us who have been abused, we think we're worthless, useless. I have now, at this date, published 128 books, and I will tell you that's insane. No normal person would write 128 books, and I have, 7 or 8 more coming out. I was driven. I wasn't aware of it, probably in the last couple of years that I've only been aware of it. I remember a couple of times editors would say to me, what drives you? And I thought, what a silly question. I'm just energetic. Well, I am, but it was way down underneath was this feeling of not being worth anything. And it took me a long time just to feel loved. My wife loved me. It took me a long time to actually believe that she loved me for who I was. See, I was the good boy in the family. You know, everybody has kind of a place. I was the good guy. I never got into trouble. I did it, but nobody found out. So I thought people liked me because I was nice to them. And it took me a lot of years to realize that some people like me just because I was, the way God does. And those are two or three of the biggest lessons I've had to learn. Any other questions? Yeah.
Why did you speak out? Why didn't you keep quiet?
Why didn't I speak out? Why did I keep quiet? I have no idea, except I don't know. I want to be real clear about that. And I was a kid, remember? But I don't think they would have believed me. I grew up in a family where I am convinced my parents did not love me, and I'm not trying to indict them for it. It was very obvious they didn't love me. I remember saying to my mother, you don't love me the way you love my brother. And my mother would give me that old standard answer, I love all of you the same. And I said, how can you do that? I was 5, 6 years old, and I knew that was impossible, but that was always her answer. And I think, I'm convinced that no one would have believed me if I'd spoken up. Maybe they would have, I don't know. All I know is that I didn't think anybody cared enough. And I think this is true with a lot of men who are sexually abused, probably women too, but especially boys, because there's something in the male psyche that we're supposed to be strong and resist this and not put up with it. Hey, we're just kids, we're innocent kids, and somebody invaded our lives. Good. Anybody else? Question? Yes? And
How difficult was it for you?
I'm sorry?
How difficult was it for you to forgive your perpetrators?
How difficult it was for me to forgive my perpetrators? I just said I'll forgive them. No, I didn't. I'm kidding you. It was very hard. It really was hard. In my case, it's fortunate that both of them were dead before I got into it, because the female relative, I could not have confronted her. I just couldn't have done that. I know that. But, I had to keep praying for them for quite a while. And one of the things I finally realized is, you know what? They were hurting people themselves. No normal person would violate another human being. And here's the way I think about it. People who are abusers are addicted. Maybe that's not the right word, but that's how I see it. It's a compulsive action. They just have to have, this is their satisfaction. And I realized they were prisoners of their own soul, their own compulsion. And now, once I understood that, I was able to start the forgiving process. Now, it probably took me several months to finally let go of it. But once I did, it was like, I got it. Yeah, you had a question.
I think one of the greatest examples of your behavior.
I can't repeat the whole thing because it was very good, by the way, of course. He's talking about the conspiracy of silence, and there is in families, and I'm dealing with a lot of men. I have a blog called menshatteringthesilence.blogspot.com, and I'd love to have anybody read it. But there is this, what I call a conspiracy of silence, in that the family colludes in this. I remember the first time I talked to my family. I was 51 when I started coming out and telling the story, but it was another 3 or 4 years before I finally told my sister, the one who had also been abused by a man, and I didn't know how she was going to respond. And her answer was, "Oh, I forgot that." Well, she was lying, I knew that, but that's what she said. And I was afraid to tell even the rest of the family, because I didn't think they would believe it. My 2 younger brothers, I'm convinced, were also abused by the female relative, not by the man. And I tried to talk to them, and they never would acknowledge it, but one of them said, "That's the past, we always just forget the past." But he was an alcoholic, so it's pretty obvious he didn't. And one of them, and I remember saying something to him about his drinking, he said, "You don't get it." He said, "The only time I have any peace is when I'm drunk." So these are the kinds of things that go on. And I've talked to so many people. There was one person I tell about in the book. I have a book called When a Man You Love Was Abused. He told his family at the table, and the mother just said, "Pass the gravy," or whatever it was. No, but they absolutely ignored him. Well, that's so typical. And there's this conspiracy of silence that just don't talk about it. And this Jerry Sandusky thing and the Catholic priest thing is finally coming out. And we live with the shame, and we live with the injury from what they did to us. And yet, one of the problems is we take the burden of that as though we did something wrong. The way I say it is, I didn't do something bad was done to me.
Yes.
Yeah. Anybody else with a question? Yes.
What can I do to help someone who's been abused?
What can you do to help someone who's been abused? Don't quote Bible verses. Not that I'm against Bible verses, because I really believe in the Bible, but too many people quote Bible verses because of their discomfort. Here's what I'm learning to say to people. Unless you've experienced it, don't quote it. Unless it becomes real to you, you're just giving me empty words. But what I think you can do is to be there, to let them know you care, and most of all, just to listen. Just to listen. I found that I've been more helpful to people just by putting my arm around them, giving them a couple of hugs, and just listening to them, and not trying to tell them how to cure themselves. And I think we live in a fix-it generation, and you women, you probably have a bigger problem with this than we men do. Men fix practical things, but women fix emotions and attitudes, right? And so, the tendency is, well, I got to fix him and find out what's wrong, and because if I can't fix him, then something's wrong with me. No, listen, it's his own battle. He's got to find it. And so a couple of things I would say is, be there for this person, let them know you care, and shut your mouth so you don't talk to your friends. One of the big problems I've run into with a lot of men is these women love their mates or friends or whatever, and then they tell their best friend who tells somebody else who tells somebody else. And see, trust is one of our issues. The people we should have been able to trust and confide in are the very people who abused us and stole our childhood. Got maybe one more question? Anybody? Okay, let me yes.
Have you healed yet?
Oh, that's a good question. Have I healed yet? And my answer is this. I'm getting close. but not quite. And here's what I've discovered. Every time I think I've just about made it, I uncover a new layer. Yeah, like I mentioned earlier about all these books I've written and how driven I was. I didn't know that. I didn't know I was driven. And it's like this. I was ready then to accept that part of myself. And, for a long time, I didn't know I was loved. And here's my attitude toward God. I knew that God loved me. Well, no, let's try another way. Intellectually, I knew God loved me, and I knew John 3:16, for God so loved the world, but I felt that God threw out this package deal, and I sneaked in on the package deal. But I never felt any specific love of God. Now, I'm talking the difference between my intellect and my heart. In my heart, I did not feel loved by God for a long time. I can say that's not true now. Now I truly know God loves me. And so I'm getting closer and closer to healing. And here's the other thing I've learned. We quote Romans 8:28 a lot. We know that all things work together for good to those who love God. And it goes on to say to be conformed to the image of His Son. I truly believe that one of the things that I'm now responsible for is to reach out and pass on my healing and the grace I've experienced to somebody else. Too many men are still out there hurting. And when I'm giving talks like this, it's amazing the men that will come to me and say to me, I was a victim. I went to several day Iron Sharpens Irons conferences, and not a lot of men have come to my breakout sessions, but invariably I will have men talk to me afterwards and say, well, I probably should have been there. And as soon as they say that, I know where they're going. And they'll say things like, I've never told anybody before. And then sometimes they'll start crying. And I think, oh God, thank you for trusting that these guys would trust me. So that's what I want to end with, saying this. People trust me. I don't know why. And it's not anything I can explain. But I think, here's one of the new things I've come to realize, is that I wanted to be able to trust people. I wanted to be able to believe that people, when they spoke, they were telling me the truth. As a survivor and a victim, I didn't know how to believe them. And so I have tried to generate, on an unconscious level, generate trust so that people open up and trust me. And see, that's my way of saying to them at the same time, I'm giving you what I've always wanted to receive. And I think that's one of the principles we all live by. I give you what I really want other people to give me. And you know what? People are now trusting me, and my life is so much richer. So the answer to that final question is not quite, almost. Thank you.